Yeah, it was when I got to 10 single family homes. It really started with the lending side of things where I saw that things could become much more difficult or get bottlenecked with single family homes if I wanted to get to the point where I wanted 50 to 100 to 200.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
All right, welcome back to the Gentle Art of Crushing It podcast, Passive Investing Edition. My name's Randy, and I'll be the host today. Really excited to have Kyle Mitchell on with us today. Kyle is the managing partner of Vertical Street Ventures. He's also managing partner of the Vertical Street or VSV Multifamily Academy. He's a best-selling author. He manages over $320 million of assets under management. The guy's just crushing it in the multifamily space. So Kyle, welcome to the show.
Randy, thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and just jump right in, Kyle? Can you walk the audience through kind of a little bit about your background and how you found this multifamily passive investing or active investing space?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally in my former life, I was in the W-2 space. I was a general manager and a regional manager for a golf management company. And so I did that in the management operations side for about 21 years. And honestly thought I was going to be in corporate America for most of my life. Got burnt out on that and started looking for other alternative investments, other things to do with my life. And started getting into personal development. And that's where I found a couple of books that helped inspire me. And back in 2008 and 9, I started buying some single family homes and generating some passive income that way through house hacking and then through also buying some turnkey rentals in the Midwest. And I liked how that was going, how there was that passive income stream coming in. I just wanted more of it, and it's really difficult to scale in single family. And so did some research and found multifamily, just randomly, honestly, Googling it. And it came up and I said, oh, I can buy apartments. This is interesting. And so I looked into it, bought a course, and 3 weeks later I was hooked. 8 months after joining a mentorship program, I left my full-time W-2 even before I had done anything in the multifamily space other than education. And then pursued this full time from there. And so, we're active syndicators, but we also invest alongside all of our other investors. So there's a passive and active piece to what we do.
Are you interested in real estate investing but don't know where to get started or think you don't have the time or money? Are you stuck in your W-2 because the golden handcuffs make it hard to walk away? If this sounds like you, check out impactequity.net and schedule some time to talk with the founder, Randy Smith. Randy went from massive income to leaving his W-2 through passive income, and he can help you do the same. www.impactequity.net.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That is very similar, I would say, right up to the point when you started buying hundreds of millions of dollars of apartments. That's a very similar path to a lot of the folks that I talk to. So congratulations, first and foremost. Now, you mentioned something I think which is probably key, as it's been key for me. You mentioned started looking into personal development. I'm curious, can you dig into that a little bit more? I think that's probably something unique and something that the audience would get some value from.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I didn't graduate from college, and I was not really big into education when I was younger. It just didn't appeal to me for whatever reason. But in my early 30s, someone had given me a book, and I read it, and I kind of fell in love with a lot of the things that it said. And it was a book, I don't remember the author, but it was just called Goals, and it was about setting goals and doing things like that. And so I just got hooked on it. And I love education. I think education is a huge aspect to everyone's life. But the thing that I found is, like, educate yourself on the things that bring you passion and joy and happiness. And so I got really hooked on stuff like that. And so I started reading Robert Kiyosaki. Everyone's heard Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm a big cash flow quadrant fan. And that book really helped me understand the four quadrants and trying to get to the left side of the quadrant to the right side of the quadrant where it's more passive and you're not trading time for money. And so those types of things really appealed to me. And so I started listening to podcasts. And so now, even today, I have a mix of different things between educating myself in the space that we're in and also continuing to strengthen my mindset, because I think a lot of things lead with the mindset, and that is a lifelong journey as well. And so I've really just taken it all in and love the journey of just, learning more about myself, personal development, getting better, pushing myself, and then also challenging my mind.
Okay. So I'm curious, have you done, you did mention a mentorship program or at least an education platform early on. Are you currently working with mentors? Are you involved in any mentorship programs today?
Yeah, absolutely. We are. I'm a big fan of mentors in every area of your life, whether it be, health and fitness, whether you have a gym or a personal trainer. But we also have a business coach, VSV does. And so we go to him. I'm also part of a group called Strategic Coach, which is through Dan Sullivan. And so VSV takes mentorship and training and education very seriously. And we think that even if you're the best of the best, right, even the Kobe Bryants of the world, or the Tiger Woods, the best in the game, they still get mentorship and training because they want to go to the next level. And so that's what we try and do. And we're always big proponents of getting mentors in your life, no matter where you are in life.
Yep. No, I love it. And I love that you mentioned Strategic Coach. I'm a big, big fan of Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy's books.
Yep.
All of the Who Not Hows, Personality is Imperfect. 10X is easier than 2X is the new one that came out last week. So yeah, very good. You're speaking my tune there for sure. So let's see here. So you were a W-2 guy, 20 plus years, golf industry. I'm guessing there's probably some story there, which we may or may not have time for. But at some point, you start buying single families, as so many do. But can you talk about that point when you shifted and made that decision that single family is not going to get me and my family where I want to go? Like, what drove you? Was it education? Was it somebody you saw doing it? What kind of drove you in the direction of multifamily?
Yeah, it was when I got to 10 single family homes, the lending becomes much more difficult because you can only have 10 of those loans on your personal name. And so now you've got to go get commercial loans, or maybe your spouse can get 10 more. But it really started with the lending side of things, where I saw that things can become much more difficult or get bottlenecked with single family homes if I wanted to get to the point where I wanted 50 to 100 to 200, and the numbers wouldn't work as well because the loans we were getting on the single family side were very favorable. Once you get into commercial, you can be creative and get better rates, but at that time, um, the single family home rates were a little bit more favorable. So I just started looking for other alternatives at that point because I knew that I would not be able to grow as fast as I wanted to, or at least I didn't have the strategy in mind at that point on how I could do it. And so I actually took 3 or 4 years between actually finding multifamily and stopping my single family home. So I continued to cash flow off of those 10 single family homes, which is fantastic. Learned a lot from that process. Um, and I looked at just doing other things on, hey, how can I get more passive income? And I wish I would have found apartments in 2013 when I stopped buying single family homes, because we'd be in a different spot for sure. But it took me about 3 or 4 years to find it. And like I said, I was kind of frustrated. I got my real estate license to learn more about real estate. I even tried different things like buying other businesses or starting a franchise, or looking into an Amazon store, and none of those things were really something that I was passionate about or wanted to pursue. And as I mentioned earlier, I was kind of last ditch effort, Googled it online. Hey, you can buy apartments, and the light bulb went off. And that's something on mindset as well. I had a limiting belief in what I was able to accomplish and achieve because I just didn't know what I didn't know, right? And I thought, oh, apartments are just for millionaires and billionaires, and how can this guy who just has a W-2 job at a golf course buy apartments? Well, the more you look into it, it's definitely possible, and there's tons of people doing it, and that's how I got into the space. And a lot of what I did in the golf industry actually translated very well into the apartment industry, because you're running a business essentially, right? And I ran businesses but for golf courses for 20 plus years. And so that's what we're doing now, is every apartment is its own business.
Okay. Yeah. So you find a multifamily and you jump in, and I'm sure that first one was probably what, 300-400 units, and you raised 25 million right out of the gates, I suspect, or did you start small?
Yeah, we started small, larger, I think, than some, but smaller than others. But our first deal was a 42 unit deal. It was $1.6 million. Um, and it took me 18 months to find it, you know? So it was definitely kind of a slow growing process, but I'm grateful for that opportunity and grateful for the time in between because it allowed us to build up our database to have enough investors to close on that deal. So we pretty much raised $1 million by ourselves. We had one other partner, mainly a balance sheet lender partner, that came in, and we were able to do that deal as our first deal. And we could have done it as a JV because it was a smaller deal, but my whole intent was to get in the syndication space, and so we did that as a syndication, so we can learn the process A to Z.
Got it. Yeah. No, and thank you for talking about that as well. So, a lot of people, primarily the passive folks that are getting in this space, start thinking that maybe I should go into active, maybe I should jump into syndication or taking down these bigger deals. But you mentioned something. You looked for that deal for 18 months. So you didn't have a paycheck for 18 months. You didn't have any real benefit. You heard 18 months worth of no's before you got that first yes. Um, so there's a lot to be said for the tenacity that you took to get down there. You didn't happen to fall into this space. It was very, very specific. You knew what you wanted to do. You set a goal, you went after it. And I'm sure there were a lot of questions and a lot of doubt and a lot of uncertainty throughout that process. But I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. Like, that probably was not easy. I can't imagine. I know you've got a wife and a baby on the way at this point. So there was probably some pretty interesting conversations going on there as well.
Yeah, definitely, and happy to talk about it. I would say for the first, let's see, 10 of those 18 months, I still had my W-2 job. So I was basically doing two jobs. My wife and I were working 50, 60 hours a week, both in the golf business, and then we put, another 40-hour work week together in trying to get our multifamily business together. And it was a dual effort. We both came to an agreement on this is what we want for our future, and we were in alignment, and that's really what drove us to be able to get to the point where we are today. But yeah, it was a long process, and thankfully, because of the mentorship, I would say we were able to keep our head down and just stick to the plan. It is all about the journey. You hear a lot of people say that, but you've got to enjoy the process and the journey and not just only fish for the outcomes. And so we built systems and processes and we stuck to it, and eventually it did pay off. And once you get the first one, they often say the next one comes right after it. And that was the case for us. We got our second deal 3 weeks after we got that first deal.
Unbelievable. Okay, yeah. And I think passive investors kind of have a similar journey as well, where I was the same way. I sat on the sidelines for months, actually years, and then finally pulled the trigger. And then very quickly, I was in like 4 or 5 deals within a handful of months. So, yeah, pretty common experience there. And I think all the work and energy and effort you're putting into that due diligence and finding those first deals or finding those first operators, that value that you gain from that stays with you and helps to add some synergy and speeds things up as you go down. So very, very cool. So now that first deal, did you do that on your own or did you have partners with that? You mentioned it could have been a JV. So did you find your current partners already at that point or what did that look like?
Yeah, so the original goal was to do it with our parents. Our parents were going to be our balance sheet. They were going to sign on the loan. And then my wife and I were going to manage the property, and then we were going to raise capital. And that was the plan all the way until 30 days before close. And I decided to switch lenders because the lender that we were going with, or the broker, was not being honest or transparent. And I think that he was trying to take advantage of me because this was our first deal. And so a lot of the things that were supposed to be set in stone were not, and things were changing every single week. So we actually decided to say, we're either going to not do the deal or not go with you because we just don't trust this relationship. And so 29 days before close, I called my now partner, Steve, who you know. I said, Steve, I'm in a really bad spot right here. I'm going to lose our first deal. Uh, do you Can you help? And so he randomly calls another guy who he got from a referral. He had never talked to him, with Arbor, who's a lender. And on a Friday night at 7 o'clock in California, it's 10 o'clock in New York, since getting off of a cruise ship, and he says, "Send me the documents. I'll take a look at it Monday." And then 29 days later, we were able to close. And so with the help of Steve and that partnership, we were able to close. So we did end up partnering with Steve on that deal, but that wasn't the initial intent.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize your first multifamily deal was with Steve. Now, was that Steve's first multifamily deal as well, or?
It was not. So he had done two other deals in the Phoenix market as well. And that's kind of how we connected. He attended a meetup that I was doing, and we were both looking in the Phoenix market and the Tucson market. And so we started chatting and then going out to the market looking at deals together. And then our second deal, actually, he found from the broker that he had closed two deals on. He sent it my way because he knew I wasn't in my W 2, so it was full time. And that's how we got that second deal.
Awesome. Awesome. Very good. Well, I'm sure there's probably hours and hours of stories we could go through of that first 42 unit up to how many units now? It's like 300 plus million, I believe, right?
Yeah, we're at about 1,500 units right now.
1,500 units, and all primarily in Phoenix and Tucson, I believe. Is that
Correct. We
correct?
have one outlier in Arlington, Texas, that we partner with a group out there that we know that's boots on the ground.
Okay, perfect. All right. So, wildly successful syndication business. You guys also, with all of your experience and knowledge and expertise in the space, you guys decided you wanted to start sharing that with others as well. So, can you talk about the academy a little bit for folks that might be interested in learning more?
Yeah, so for us, I wouldn't have gotten started without mentorship. Steve, Jenny, Kiyoshi, all of the partners are the same way. They had some type of mentorship that helped them elevate themselves in this space. And so we mentioned it earlier, we're really dedicated to that, and we want to give back to the community as well. And I think that with mentorship, you can definitely excel or accelerate your growth and your knowledge base by joining a mentorship program. And so that was really the intent, was to help others in this space break that barrier to entry, because buying real estate, especially 10, 20, $30 million properties or even larger, it's a very high barrier to entry. Especially in the markets that we were in over the last 2 years, it was also almost impossible to really get started. And we are that bridge for our students in order to get started a little bit faster, get introductions into the market, and help people along to get to that point. Because once you get in and you start doing deals, you really start to realize that this is a life changing industry if done the right way. And so to be able to provide that opportunity for other people, like we were provided from our mentors, is something that we're really passionate about.
I love it. Love it. Yeah. And I know a number of folks that are in the academy. They speak very, very highly of it. Folks talk, and there's a lot of those communities out there, and folks talk specifically about the partnerships that are built in this group, the educational content. It seems like some of the groups have good education, some have okay, but it sounds like your offering seems to bring both community, partnerships, opportunity, and the education all under one roof. And I've heard nothing but great things about it. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, I was at a conference because you guys also do an annual conference, which is something, if folks are in the area or want to go to a conference, I would highly recommend this one. It's one of the best ones that I've been to. But you guys mentioned something from the stage this last time that really intrigued me. A lot of people get into this space to make money. A lot of people get into the space to have this wildly successful business or the recognition or whatever that may be. But a lot of people also get into this space because they want to provide amazing housing for their residents. And you guys have a program that you launched recently that I'd love for you to share with the audience, because it gave me shivers when you guys were talking about this from the stage. I just think it's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for allowing me to share. We're calling it the Residents First Initiative. And we've kind of flipped our entire business plan and strategy on its head. And that is our true focus. And when you focus on the residents, decision making is very easy, right? Does it help the resident or does it not? Yes or no. And so it makes decision making very easy. But our focus is the residents. And I know there's a lot of syndicators that also focus on the residents, and they do a fantastic job. We're trying to take this to the next level and build community, but not only build community, we want to help people elevate and move on, or level up in their life as well. And so we're building the most important thing, or the most exciting thing for me, is a 24-month financial roadmap that we're building for each of the residents that live in our communities. And so we're going to take them on this 2-year journey of, hey, how do I start making passive income? How do I start making a little bit more income for myself so I can pay my rent and maybe buy other things? How can I provide more for my family? And then just understanding from a financial standpoint. I think financial literacy is something that is not taught enough. Even going down to ages 5 to 7, I would say, is really where we should start talking about that and introducing it. And so we're passionate about bringing financial literacy to everyone that lives in our apartments and in our communities so that they can further their lives as well. I think financial literacy or talking about money is a very uncomfortable thing for a lot of people, and it's not something that is often talked about. And so we want to create a space where it is comfortable to talk about and a space where it's free for our communities and our residents to get that education so that they can advance their lives. So that's step one, is to introduce that program and really take them through that journey. And then eventually we will also be offering scholarships to our residents in our communities to put people through college.
I love it. I love it. And I believe you took it one step further, and personally, you've authored a book kind of centered around that as well, correct?
Yeah, the book's called Lottery, and it's more for 9 to 13 years old. But I'm actually encouraging parents to read it with their kids, and it's just an introduction to money and how money can be used as a tool to not only help yourself and better your life, but to help other people and better their lives as well. And like I said earlier, a lot of people are intimidated by money, and just understanding it a little bit more and knowing that money is meant to be a tool to do good things with can change your mindset on having those conversations.
I love it. I love it. That's and I think that's something where you guys, you personally, and then the group as a whole, really differentiate yourself from a lot of the other operators out there. We've all seen the investor decks where we're going to do a value add. We're going to increase the rents by 3, 5, 7, 8, $800 a month, and it leaves this lingering feeling inside, like, well, what happens to those residents that
Mm.
were living there that can't afford the 3, 4, 5, $600 per month rent increase? So you guys are taking a different approach where, yes, over time, rents will be increased. But if we can help our tenants, our residents, become more financially sound, then that helps everybody, right? So I love that. And yeah, I think that's a really big piece of what you guys offer. So
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I maybe go into that a little bit more. We learned this through the last 4 or 5 years being in the industry that it doesn't necessarily feel good. You're doing good things by adding value to the property, but it doesn't feel good to the people that can't afford it. So what can we do on that point too? So we even have, or we are building like an exit strategy type of program as well for people that can't afford it. Hey, what can we do to have a referral program so that, hey, you can't afford it, we understand, here's some suggestions in your price range of where you can move, instead of saying, well, sorry, you've got to move yourself out. We are trying to help other people in that community too, whether you live at our property or not.
love it. Love it. Awesome. Well, let's kind of shift gears a little bit. I would be doing a disservice to our audience if we didn't get into kind of state of economy, what's going on, like passive investor challenges that we're seeing. We've seen a lot of trends with interest rates increasing. I personally have seen a lot of distributions stopped, and you hear talk of capital calls. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that and what you see coming in the coming months and potentially years as well.
Yeah, I definitely don't think we've got to the point where it's at its worst quite yet, at least in the operation side of the business and the capital calls and distribution stopping. I think interest rates, knock on wood, hopefully are at least stabilizing a little bit here. I'm done trying to guess what the Fed is going to do, so we're just kind of letting it play out. But I think it's going to be a couple years here. I know a lot of people are hoping that by the end of the year, rates are going to come down, and then capital is going to come flooding in and kind of save the day. But at the same time, if that does not happen, what are you going to do to make sure that your properties are okay and operating okay? And so it's all about operations. It's an operations game. You've got to make sure you're streamlined. You got to make sure you're efficient and doing everything from an operations standpoint. Um, you know, Capital calls, not something that we've done or plan on doing, but certainly depending on the type of debt you put on the property and how low of a rate cap you have on that property, you may be facing a point now where you can't pay your mortgage, and so you're going to have to call capital. Maybe not because the NOI isn't performing. I know a lot of properties are performing on an NOI standpoint, but they didn't plan for the interest rates to go this high. I don't know that anyone did. And so the delta between what they were underwriting on the debt service to what it is now can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that is where operators are having a tough time. From an operations standpoint, has there been a small dip? I think so, but I think it's also bounced back already, and at least in the markets that we're in. And so our NOIs are fine. It's just the below that line is where some operators are having trouble. So I think stopping distributions, this is a business. I said it earlier, and there are ebbs and flows, and there's market cycles, right? So things go up and they come down and they come back up. And so we are stewards of our investors' capital, right? We have a fiduciary responsibility to protect that capital first and foremost. And so stopping distributions, I think, gets a bad connotation. But at the same time, as an operator of those properties, we want to do what's best for our investors. And sometimes that is saying, hey, we've got to stop distributions right now because that cash needs to be used for something else, or put in a reserve just in case things don't get better for another 12, 14, 16 months. So, would you rather pay them out distributions? Yes. But what about a year or two from now when you paid out distributions and now you've got to do a capital call because you sent them money that maybe you really shouldn't have to? So I think kicking the can down the road on that is something that's, it's a tough decision. But for us, we're going to err on the side of caution because, look, if we end up cutting distributions and then the market does improve, well, then we can pay out what we cut and you'll get that back, when the market comes back. And so I'm not one to guess what the market's going to do. So we're going to err on the side of caution. And so, we've stopped distributions on some of the properties, not all of them. But, it's typically the ones that we put bridge loans on that have, interest rates caps that are low, but still we had interest rate risk. And so we want to err on the side of caution and make sure our investors' capital is safe, and not just focus on just the distribution.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for walking through that. I will say that, in years past, capital calls and distributions being stopped was probably less prevalent, just simply because of the nature of what was going on in the market. And as I would call myself a relatively new passive investor, less than 10 years, I had not been in an environment personally where I had distributions stopped. Mm-hmm. So the first email notification or call that I got from an operator with that news was a little alarming at first. As I've continued to do more research and dig into this and start talking to people that have been passively investing for 10, 15, 20 years, they kind of chuckle because distributions being ceased and even capital calls to a certain extent are a part of this business. Mm-hmm. And either one of those don't necessarily mean it's a bad thing or that your investment's going to be hurt in the long haul. It just means that either one, we need to reserve those dollars to be used elsewhere, just like you said, or two, maybe additional capital needs reinvested back into the business are going to provide the best returns and the best outcome for our investors. So it's been a mindset shift for myself, being a cash flow investor. But now that I understand and I've been educated and understand the state of the market, it makes a lot more sense. So thank you for your vantage point on that. So let's do this. I do try to keep these to 30 minutes, and I really feel like I need to increase that because I say this every single time. There's so much more I want to ask, but where do you see the next couple of years for Kyle Mitchell and for VSV?
Yeah, for Kyle Mitchell, it's continuing to work with VSV and grow our company. We have an amazing team, and we just want to continue to build our culture. And our number one focus is that residents first initiative, because I think that's going to be the backbone of our company. And so I'm really looking forward to the data that ends up coming out 1, 2, 3 years from now as we start to build up this program. And then just continue to operate our properties and deliver for our investors on that side. And then hopefully grow our academy so we can help reach more people and educate more people. Personally, it's growing my family. As you mentioned earlier, we've got a daughter on the way in August, and so super excited for our first child and raising and parenting her. And so Lolita and I are going into the next phase of our life, which is really exciting as well.
Outstanding. Well, very good. Well, I do have a few questions I'd like to ask everybody at the end. You mentioned a couple of great books along the way, but specifically thinking about the newer or new passive investor, what would be a book or a podcast or some educational resource that you would suggest to the new passive investor?
I'm a big podcast person myself, so I listen to about 16 different podcasts, and The ones that I found valuable, we have our own podcast, Passive Income Through Multifamily Real Estate, which is really good for newer investors. But I also find Joe Fairless's I can't remember, Best
Best
Ever
ever.
podcast, and then Whitney Sewell's syndication show, because they're daily. And so, you can pick and choose which ones you like based on the topic, and they provide such great content as well. So it allows you not to have to wait a week until the next one if you really want to kind of boost up your knowledge base.
Okay, very good. And what is a recent bucket list item that you checked off, and maybe one that you're hoping to in the near future?
Well, one would be having a daughter or
Yeah,
becoming a father. That was something that, we put on our list last year, for sure. And so that's the biggest one right now that we're focusing on. And my next kind of bucket list item, or I don't know if you call it a bucket list item, but it's just to be an amazing father. So I'm just trying to educate
awesome.
myself as much as possible. And I know you can only read so many books. I mean, I've been told by everybody, but I like to be as prepared as I can. And then go into it. So just really looking forward to the next journey, next journey of our lives.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Kyle, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. As you know, I'm an investor and super happy and satisfied with the returns I'm getting from you guys. I love the content you guys are doing with the conferences and the education material you're putting out there. So thank you guys so much for being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Randy.
All right. And to our listeners, as always, I encourage you to continue the education process, continue to get educated around this passive investing space. We're very confident after you dig in and start to see the value that you as a household, as an individual can get from the passive investing space, you'll start to shift more and more of your investment dollars over into the syndication model. So thank you all for joining us today, and we'll talk again in a week or so. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.